Want to stop juggling spreadsheets, calendars, and a dozen apps just to run your rentals? Logify makes it easy. It's an all-in-one toolkit for hosts. Build a direct booking website, automate guest messaging, and keep all your channels in sync. Running your rental business your way has never been simpler. And for Good Morning Hospitality listeners, you can get 20% off any yearly plan with code GMH20. Just check the link in the show notes to get started today.
Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Good morning, everybody. How are we?
Good morning, Leo. How's it going?
I'm very well, Sarah. Very well. How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Monday morning, the sun is shining. Finally, we've had 2 weeks of nonstop rain in Barcelona, so it is about time. We had some
Yeah.
decent weather.
You've had it tough, haven't you? You've had it really tough. Yeah, we've got the same thing here, actually. One of those sort of nice, calm mornings that we don't get very often where the sun shines and we haven't got the pelting rain or the clouds. So, no, I'm with you. I can't complain. I can't. November in Europe looking nice. How was your weekend?
Yeah, really good. Really good weekend. I'm blanking on what I actually did, which I think is a good thing. That means that I relaxed and didn't do anything too strenuous. No, I mostly just hung out with some friends and um, had a really chill weekend, which was exactly what the doctor ordered.
Good. Blanking on the weekend is definitely a sign that it's been enjoyable. In my case, it's the sign that I'm probably terribly jet lagged because I really can't remember what we did. So I walked
You've
through
been
the store.
everywhere. Tell
I
me,
know.
where have you been, Leo?
No, well, this latest one was Miami. So I landed on Miami on election day, which was an interesting place to land.
Cool.
Not for anything to do with political reasons, of course, but I was there for the Host Away conference, which was great fun. I really, really enjoyed myself there. Lots of really engaged and informed property managers there to learn. It was really, really cool. It was,
Fantastic.
we were exhibiting, so I was there with my official Superhog / Truvy hat on, but yeah, had a great time. Miami South Beach is a very, very cool spot. First time for me, so I really enjoyed myself. But I landed, so I flew through the night Friday, and I landed on Saturday morning, and I
Mhm.
walked through the door, and within about half an hour, um, I was dressed up, full on play mode with whatever Sadie wanted to play. I think she was maybe being Elsa. She was being a princess. I think I was being like a troll or something. I was dressed up in something, and then 10 minutes later, I was baking cookies with her on her demand, and then we were in a soft play center by about lunchtime, and I was thinking, this is not the beautiful post-flight, let's sit and watch the TV and have a duvet weekend that I used to be able to do when I was younger. So yeah, I was right into it. I
No.
was thrown right into family life.
How were the cookies? And if they were good, can I have the recipe?
Yeah, do you know what they will actually say? You'll see it on Instagram. It seems like every single Instagram recipe is like peanut butter, banana, oatmeal. It's that whole vibe, and it's good for kids because obviously kids want to bake a lot, but then you're not just you're not having cookies full of sugar that send them wild. So it's one of those. It was one of those recipes. It was fine. Yeah, it was good. I put a bit of jam in for fun, and I think that made everyone happy. No, it was good. It was good. We do a lot of that as a family, but it was I don't normally arrive back. I normally arrive back on a working day, which is great because then I can go to my office and pretend I'm working while I hear Jasmine struggling with our younger one downstairs. But I just couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. I was straight into the mix of family life. It was good. And the exciting thing is for me, I'm not stateside again until probably late April of next year.
Oh, that's
So
fab.
yeah, it is good. It's good. It's about time, isn't it? Which means that the universe will correct itself, and the next time it'll be you going back to your homeland, not me, sort of in there for you.
Well, I'm going in 2 weeks. I'm going for Thanksgiving, so I'll be there before you are next
How
time, at least.
exciting! How exciting! And we'll
Yeah.
do a proper Sarah. We'll do a proper Thanksgiving episode with you where you can tell us what you're giving thanks for. I'm sure it'll be something to do with short-term rentals and and earnings calls and all those sort of great things.
Absolutely.
Until you get there, because you've still got a couple of weeks. Tell us Um, have you been keeping yourself honest? Are you hitting the gym? Are you hitting the classes? Are you doing the good
I
stuff?
have. I did, well, I think I told you this on the last time that we recorded, but I did something to my hip, and so I was, like, probably a week where I didn't go to the gym. Um, I just like, I didn't have any range of motion. As my mom would say, I had a catch in my get along, and so I I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna go smoother. So last week I did do my boot camp classes, but I went, um instead of doing the running bit where it's like sprinting and like super heavy cardio, I just walked on an incline on those, and it was actually fine. So I might repeat that because I enjoyed the class more. And so I might just fake an injury for the rest of my life. Um, but no, it was really good. Kind of back in the routine. I did not go to the gym this morning. I set my alarm and did not wake up. So I don't know. I think it's the winter that it
It's
doesn't
Monday.
call me to get out of bed early, you know? When it's
It's
dark
Monday.
outside, I can't do it.
I think there's look, you book the classes, you write the program, you do the training plan, you make the plan to exercise, fully cognizant of the fact that you will miss 5% of it. That's as a minimum. Maybe sometimes on a bad week you're missing 20% of it, but that's all part of the game, right? You write the plan and you miss a little bit of it. Um, we're T minus 2 weeks from our move to Brighton to the coast.
Ex
After 16 years of living in London, this is mad exciting for us. And so that means I will start I don't know if it's too late in the year to start this, but I will start the cold water swimming off the coast of Brighton, which feels like it'll be the fresh start I need because I'm a little bit bored of just running around London as I have been for so long. So I'll be
Yeah,
running on the seafront, then jumping in. So I will keep me honest. I'll report back and I'll tell you how bloody cold the water is.
I will keep you honest. Do you do cold showers to prep?
I mean, I do, but it's hard at this time of year because it's so bloody cold in the UK. Like, I'm good in the summer, but autumn, winter's really hard because you just don't feel like it. So I'm hoping that the call of the sea brings me in, and I'll just go for it. Who knows?
Yeah,
We're talking about
fall and
8,
winter,
9 degrees, really.
that's what really shows your commitment, Leo. Anybody can do cold showers in the summer, buddy. That's not
Yeah. Anyone can do
that's
cold
not
showers if they
like
live in Barcelona, this glamorous beachside city.
it's true, yeah.
Um,
It's true. Well, I will keep you honest, and I can't wait to hear about the move. Have you even started packing yet?
No, absolutely not. Of course not. You know me so well. You knew I hadn't started. Thanks. Such a loaded question. You knew I
No,
hadn't
I see
started.
all the books in the back, and I'm just thinking about all the other things. You must just have wares everywhere.
No, it's like, Leo, do you want to get on a plane and go to a conference instead of doing anything useful like packing? Yep, I'll do that. Sign me up. Sign me up.
Yeah,
Let's do it. Sign me up.
anything but boxing things up.
All right. Well, look,
Oh,
progress report next week. If I've still not packed a box, I'm going to be in trouble. Okay, here we go. So big week. Another. See, if it seems like it's so busy at the moment. Conferences and lots of things
yeah.
going on. Obviously, we've had the Airbnb earnings call, which we're going to
Mm.
deep dive, which feels like a significant one. We'll have a look at how it compares to Expedia as well. Before that, though, let's talk about what's caught our eye this week, both good and bad. Sarah, any highlights for us?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the French Parliament has passed a bill to adopt even stricter regulations in France. This is not really surprising to me. France was one of the first countries to really go head to head with Airbnb in particular and kind of insist like that they would shut them down if they didn't start collecting taxes. And so I think it's pretty in the line of what we would expect from the French government. The interesting thing here is that once again, the the citation of like why they've passed this bill is affordable housing. And so there's once again this sort of narrative that short-term rentals are the reason that nobody has affordable housing rather than many other factors that probably play into it, right? So that people are moving more and more towards cities. um, they're moving away from smaller towns, which means there's a higher concentration of the population. The population is growing. You have people coming in as well from other parts of Europe, digital nomads, etc. So I think it's a simplification, but that is what they're reporting. Um, and essentially, what they're aiming to do is cutting tax breaks. So um, previously, there were some tax breaks of between 50 to 30%. Um, which was for tourist accommodation, and you could apply for that sort of tax benefit. Um, that's going to be completely gone. So it's essentially making it less profitable to operate a short-term rental. And in the article, what's really interesting is that they basically cite that the reason they're doing this is so that all of these great hosts can take their properties off of Airbnb and put them on long-term rent, which you know how I feel about that. If you are making currently, I don't know, 50 grand a year from an Airbnb property, you are not going to put it on long-term rental where you might make 12 grand a year, especially if you have a mortgage for that property and you purchase that property as an Airbnb investment. You're not going to be able to make the mortgage payment if you do it long term. Or maybe you don't want the hassle of a long-term rental. Maybe they're going to move to midterm. So I think that's still a folly that we talk about on here often. Just because you make short-term rentals harder doesn't necessarily mean that stock is going to go into long-term rental. I think it's probably going to shift much more either towards midterm or for student housing or something like that, where the margins are still going to be higher. But I guess we will keep an eye on it.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I agree with your analysis. I would add, I read that local mayors will be given the authority to make decisions as well, which I think is interesting because, again, something we've spoken about on the pod a few times is this idea that policymakers need to decide what type of city they're trying to build, what type of area, what type of region, how they're trying to attract people in. I noticed that the referenced here is the mayor of Marseille, which is where we got the train to this summer for our holiday. And I would say, without reading too further into it, that there probably is in Marseille a big urban population with housing problems in parts. And again, this seems to be like a political football that's kicked around in the urban. But I'm sure they're very happy to have the tourists in the rural, the secluded, the hilltop towns that they're trying to attract all the tourists into. So again, you've got to think about a metro mayor versus someone that's local government that's got small towns that want tourists to come in, because the tourist element is what keeps a lot of these towns alive, because people are in spending money, having coffees, buying the artwork, buying the food, all of that good sort of stuff. So yeah, definitely want to watch. It also matches with what's gone in the UK, in the UK, which is that a tax break has been removed for furnished short let. So it seems to be where we are. My highlight, low light, whatever you want to call it, links to this in a small way, I think, because what's caught my eye this week is that Centre Parks are opening their first resort in Scotland. Now, at home, you can be forgiven for not knowing the brand Centre Parks, but they essentially are a holiday cabin company where they take over an area of wooded land, build holiday lodges, put a swimming pool, a bar, a shop in the middle, maybe some abseiling and orienteering and all that sort of fun stuff, maybe a zip wire for the kids. And essentially they make like a theme park, I think, of what a holiday in the woods would look like. And they're great. They are really good. I'm such a fan of this sort of holiday. Scotland has had a lot of regulation around short-term rental. There's never been enough accommodation in Scotland during the summer, because during the winter the weather is not that favorable for outdoor tourism. Let's put it that way. But in the summer it's wonderful, and in the shoulder season as well, it can be really nice as well if you wrap up. So this site, I'm sure, will do incredibly well in Scotland. And there is an argument to be said that where you remove short-term rental from the mix, you are essentially putting more of the power in the hands of this rural. We talked about it a few weeks ago. I think we were watching a deal going on with Hip Camp, and we said, look, these rural providers of lodges will be licking their lips at this stuff. I would just say, why not think about rural homes with a similar hat on, policymakers? Because clearly it's nice to keep the money in the hands of local people as well as big global businesses. So I don't know if this one caught your eye, Sarah, if you've got a view on it.
Yeah, I think ultimately nobody's going to do anything about it from a legislative standpoint because it's not there's not a story behind it. It's not interesting to them. What I mean by that is like there's no enemy here. Nobody's fighting over rural land. And ultimately that's what all of these restrictions come to. So I think it's a really interesting concept. I'm still not 100%. I think if for, like, their annual holiday, right, people might be much more prone to doing outdoor activities. There's a lot of, research that supports the fact that even Gen Z is like, "Okay, let's stay 1 day in Paris, and then let's explore outside," right? Or maybe we stay outside even when they travel, and they prefer more of these sort of outdoorsy holidays. Um, but I agree, like, it's the big companies kinda getting getting in there first, improving the concept. It's not a small cabin in the middle of the woods, it's a local host, it's a local operator where that money's going right back into the community, and so, I don't know, it remains to be seen. I think as well from the regulation standpoint, I think it's just a lot easier for these companies to come in and do that. They're not up against it's easier for them to get funding as well because they're not up against all these strict regulations. And they're not really demonized because in the end it's, "Oh, but we're connecting people with nature." And so I think it'll be really easy for them to come in and swoop in and expand and maybe even to kind of take away some of the opportunity that might be lying in the shift towards more rural or outdoorsy tourism from locals. Because if they can come in and make a massive campsite that looks really cool, that has a zip line, that's attractive for families, that has a lot of resources, that maybe a single person who wants to invest in, say, a cabin somewhere in the woods, you're not going to have all of those amenities because you don't have the same amount of capital behind it. And so I think, I don't know, I also have kind of two minds about it because for me, like taking a holiday to the middle of the countryside, part of the beauty of that is being alone rather than like at a traditional campsite. I mean, there's something to be said for having that sort of community as well. If you want to do more of a camping sort of holiday, but it's not the same to me. It's still corporate. It's corporate in the woods.
Corporate in the woods. I like that. I like it's corporate in the woods. I'd add that when you're also in a centre parks, you're not spending money in the local economy. Don't go to the local
Exactly.
pub, you don't use the local shop because you've got it all there on site and you park your
Yeah.
car miles away and then you take a bike, which is lovely, the pedal bike everywhere. Um, but it means you don't leave site as well. And so with the times I've done it, I could be anywhere. I could be on the moon for all I interact with the local economy. And that's
Mhm.
one of the beauties of short-term rental, right? Is that you're there, but you're connected to the local area because unlike a hotel, you don't have food and beverage, and unlike a Center Parks campsite, you don't have a bar and a restaurant and all of that type of stuff. Let's keep an eye. Corporate in the woods. I would say this. I'm not pro the idea of being in a cabin in the woods on my own. I don't like the feeling of isolation there. I give me corporation and a group of people at the bar that I can go and talk to if my family are driving me mad, or more importantly, I'm driving them mad. So there, I'm pro corporate in the wood. Thanks for that, Sarah.
You're welcome. I've also that's and now we know who their public is. I mean, there had to be somebody. Who are their
This is me.
ideal
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of this sort of thing. Okay, gang. One other thing that caught my eye while I was traveling, we got to talk about tax. Sorry, someone's got to talk about it, but it's important. The EU plans to hike VAT on Airbnb, Uber, and the like after Estonia drops its veto. So this
Mm,
potentially quite interesting for the industry in Europe, hence why I'm mentioning it. So EU diplomats have agreed to reform the VAT rules that would mean tax hikes on short-term rental and taxi-style services. So any of the platforms that hit that, we are looking at. I think essentially it's another tax break removal. You could see it that way, and also lobbyists from the conventional hotel industry have supported this because they're saying it's evening up the playing field of taxes that they have to pay. Uh,
mm,
European Holiday Home Association criticised the rules as unfair and potentially harmful to small scale operators and providers, which I think is potentially fair. So the tax will be on the online platforms. It will be up the responsibility to collect the tax will be on the online platforms, like Airbnb
mm,
that's referenced here. So we'll now be responsible for registering, collecting VAT on behalf of their hosts, rather than assuming the host will do it themselves. So while simplifying the process, as it clearly will, it will also
mm.
increase the administrative burden on platforms. So the platforms are against this for that reason. That probably means they're going to lose.
Yeah.
However, I think the outcome is we're just going to see higher costs on the host, on the end user, because if it's costing the OTA more money to collect the fees, then the shareholders are not going to see that go down as a cost line in the business as to somehow paid for. So I think it could translate to higher admin fees and higher costs for guests ultimately as well, making the industry potentially less competitive. So that's why I think it's significant. This is not something that, this is not something to ignore. We're probably going to see this at the just added to the overall price of the accommodation. And again, when a consumer's doing it, should I stay at the hotel? Should I stay at the resort? Should I stay at the Center Parks Lodge with Leo? Should I stay at the short-term rental? All of this stuff is gonna come to mind.
I totally agree, and I think it's sort of tracking with. I mean, for a while now, the average nightly rate in Europe has always been lower than in North America. So, I mean, month of October, just over $152 a night was the average daily rate in EMEA versus 258 in North America. So it's a pretty big difference. What the average host earns from a property or an Airbnb property or Airbnb-esque property in Europe is typically less than what the average property earns in the States as well. And I think you're absolutely right. I think all of that ultimately is going to be translated. It's the stricter regulation, it's the taxation. It's all just going to translate to higher prices. I don't think that people are going to necessarily stop traveling in short-term rentals. I think it's just going to change the perception of short-term rentals. I think historically, when they first launched, there was a lot more focus on, oh, short-term rentals are so much cheaper. It's a cheap alternative. And I think that concept in the States and in North America in general went away a long time ago. It's not necessarily the cheapest way to travel. It is, in many cases, my preferred way to travel, especially if I'm in a group or traveling with my parents or something. But it's long since not been cheaper than necessarily than hotels. And so I think we're going to finally start seeing some of that equalization in Europe, which I think also with a higher price is going to come higher expectations from the guests. So we're constantly talking about the professionalization of the industry and standards that the guests have for when they do a check-in at a short-term rental property. And I think we're going to see those continue to rise alongside the costs.
I think you're right. And also, us Europeans, we Europeans, I'm going to put you in that category, Sarah, because I feel like have you got residency, you got passport, you must have something, right?
I have permanent residency. I applied for my Spanish passport 6.5 years ago, and I'm still waiting. Spain, hello.
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 That's exciting. We live in hope for you, but you're basically a European. I think we in Europe don't necessarily love as well spending a ton of money on services like accommodation. So there is always that kind of that price point sensitivity. I think is higher in Europe culturally. It's like how do you get the best deal. Like shoulder season travel is very popular. I think for that reason. And again, we don't talk about it enough generally as an industry, but I think it means that people very often will be on an OTA, maybe one that does hotels and short-term rentals side by side, and we'll just be making that comparison and going, well, how do we find the best deal, because we've got to pay for the flights and we haven't got a ton of disposable income. We don't want to eat into our savings with this family holiday. So it's definitely one to consider. It's significant for sure. All right, gang, let's get into earnings call. Sarah, you've been having a look.
I have. Yeah, let's talk about it. So, first of all, let's start with the non-surprising news. As always, Airbnb's earnings were not that bad, but their stock went down 9%. So, poor Airbnb, right? It's just a classic. No, we didn't expect anything less.
When I read it, Sarah, I thought that's exactly going to be your chuckle to yourself, because you call it every single time. I was like, yep, that tracks. That tracks.
It's like, I mean, they barely missed what the analysts thought, was going to happen, but they were pretty on with, the street estimates. And so it makes absolutely no sense once again, but their stock went down 9%. So that's sort of the highlight. Regardless of that, the company reported $3.73 billion in revenue, which was up 10% year over year. So, as we always say, and we'll talk about Expedia in a little bit, but Expedia posts 10% year over year growth in revenue and stock goes up, not down. So, another interesting thing in this earnings is that Airbnb stopped disclosing their supply growth At Airbnb, we estimate that to be 14% year over year. Um, but there's a couple of theories as to why they stopped disclosing this. It's probably because it is still, although it went up, it's still lower than it historically was in terms of percentage. And this is because Airbnb really is focused much more on quality rather than quantity. So in the beginning, their goal was get as many properties as we can, get as many hosts as we can. And I think they're starting to realize that they have a brand that they have to protect, and that the word Airbnb doesn't necessarily, people don't associate that with, oh, this host was bad on Airbnb, but this was a good host. They just think, well, that was a bad Airbnb. And so they have removed 300,000 underperforming listings in recent months. And so that obviously is going to impact the supply growth because they prefer to have properties that are a little bit higher quality rather than just go after the numbers, which is interesting. Um, in the co-host segment, which is another one that we said we were going to follow it closely, and we are. So in addition to the 10,000 co-hosts that they launched the program with, since the launch, they've received 20,000 new potential co-hosts, and that was just within 3 weeks of the announcement. So um, Brian Chesky was pretty bullish on the fact that he really truly believes that the co-hosting is going to take over the industry, and that is going to be kind of one of the biggest growth paths, not only for listing growth, because maybe he strongly believes that people who previously didn't want to list their property because they couldn't fathom having to do the management or didn't know what to do with it, didn't want to look for a property manager, can use this co-host service. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that. There's also sentiment that AI is going to take over a lot of their customer support at scale. So I think that will be an interesting one to see how that kind of impacts the jobs that Airbnb currently has. I'm sure there's lots of people who are employed in that support vehicle that are going to need to find another place in the company or another or another skill set potentially. Um, and then experiences are planning to be relaunched in May of 2025. I'm cynical on that as always.
Always.
On experiences, I don't know. It tracks with everywhere they're going, right? It tracks with the Icons launch. It tracks with the fact that I think in order to compete, they're going to have to get more into other sectors, right? I mean, Jesse was talking about launching all these new businesses that are sort of under the Airbnb umbrella. So whether that be experiences, whether that be travel, whether that be anything that is not just accommodation. So kind of going after the Amazon model. Um, I am cynical. I feel like if they haven't done it yet, it's not like an Expedia or Booking where, like, from the get-go, they had all of these things. And I understand the need to want to do that because Airbnb is often compared with Expedia or Booking when really, I were talking about this before the show just briefly, like it's not the same. Expedia and Booking have always had hotels, flights, all these other sort of what I would consider like ancillary services, but you can add all these things onto your travel. So I'm curious to see if Airbnb can kind of hack it, and if so, I think the interesting challenge that they have in doing so is that Airbnb for me has always been a household name. So, you go and stay in an Airbnb. I'm going to an Airbnb, we booked an Airbnb, whatever. Whereas it's not it's not the same as when I think, "Oh yeah, I made this reservation on Booking." I don't go around saying, "Oh, I booked a Booking." You don't say that, or I booked an Expedia. It's a different concept, and so for me, it's easy to say, "Yeah, I booked then my flights on Expedia, or I booked my car hire on Expedia." But to say you booked it through Airbnb, I just don't know if the brand name, I don't know if it hurts their ability to do that rather than helps it, unless it's more in-house and there's a lot of quality controls and things like that, unless they do something that's really different. But for me, if they're just acting as a meta search for those additional services, I think that's where it's going to be tricky for them.
Spot on analysis. I totally agree. Totally agree. I think the reason why their stock price may have come down a bit in after hours trading is they're so intrinsically linked with the fate of the short-term rental industry in a way that Expedia and Booking just aren't. I mean, maybe they're not fair comparisons. Maybe we need to think about that when we're rolling out these conversations around the earnings calls. I was I was reading around Verbo's earnings, sorry, Expedia Group's earning. B2B revenue jumps 18% in Q3 versus 9% for B2C. Airbnb's exposed here, right? Because they just don't have that level of business. It is, but again, the advantage is they are the people who you go to for a short-term rental and you go, I booked it on Airbnb, I Airbnb'd it. So that has to play into their hands. But the other side of it is they're talking about what's coming next as new. And I think investors would probably say to themselves, well, that's great, but you're talking about your growth as being from new businesses, as you've said there. That's, again, there's no certainty that those new businesses will work. I mean, look at the experiences part of the business. That's been relaunched and launched and closed and reopened, more times than you and I have talked about it on the pod. So, I think there's a potential anxiety around that, and it's really hard to diversify. If you are Airbnb, it's really hard to diversify. I figure that the most effective way to do it, if they want to kind of mimic the other players in their space, this is not saying they will, maybe they are going to build groundbreaking new things, as you just said, but I think that if they're going to mimic, it's probably through M&A. It's not through building their own. It's going to be using some of their reserves to purchase providers who they think are doing something. I would assume. And so I think, so where does it send me then? It sends me to this point that I think potentially people are looking at the market and saying, I don't think the short-term rental market is going to grow at the levels it's grown at in the years post-COVID. It probably will still grow. Again, I'm speculating, but it probably will grow, but not at such a high level, given like economic uncertainty still, inflation still being painfully high in some areas, and the regulatory pressures on the industry, which we can't ignore. So we've just talked about like actual real life examples of deals going on in different ways in the rural secluded market. I think customers are going to continue to want to look for that at the moment. And it will be really interesting to see how mayors in Europe react and what regulations they put in place as well. But clearly investors are looking at that and going, oh, Airbnb have got a lot of headwinds versus Booking or Expedia that can just say, well, our hotel business is growing at detriment of our short-term rental business, but that's fine. The overall group numbers look more positive. I don't know. That's where my mind goes, Sarah.
I absolutely agree, and I think that's why Airbnb feels the need to launch all these other things. I think they need that diversification in order to keep investors happy. I just don't know if it's the right move for them. I don't know if it's on brand, and I don't know if it's too late to try and establish, a household name. I think you're kind of spot on there in terms of if they're going to do it and it's going to work, it's going to have to be Airbnb owned companies. Like what I don't see them being able to do successfully um, is basically just being an aggregator, right? And saying, okay, well, you want to hire a car, here's Budget and Avis and Enterprise and all these, traditional car rental places. I don't see people passing through that just to pay the commission in the same way that they would on like a Booking or Expedia, because maybe you get it all bundled and you get some kind of genius discount, whatever it is. But I think for Airbnb, for it to be successful, if they do it well, it could work. But I think they're going to have to purchase those companies. I think they're going to have to be a lot more strict about compliance with the brand and with the overall experience. We've often talked about the experiences launch and relaunch and all these kinds of things. And for me, experiences is more on brand for them than all of these other things that they're talking about getting into. And they still haven't been able to crack the code on that. And so I'm skeptical about their ability to be able to crack it on things that are so different to kind of the core of what they are. But I think you're absolutely right. In terms of the earnings, we should think about that more often. I think we often compare it more flippantly to Booking or an Expedia, but it's not. It's a small portion of what those companies do.
I agree with you. And the other one I think is completely logical for them is the co-host network, because they are so intrinsically associated with short-term rental. Now, the benefits of the co-host program. Let's see. I'm sure if you are a manager, you're across Europe, across the US, please let us know, European crew, if you're joining the co-host network. We know that clearly they are, because we've got 20,000 people joining it. But that to me feels like much safer ground for Airbnb. But I don't think there's any money in it.
I think that the way that it was explained, at least in the earnings call, the way that they think there's money in it is because that's how they're going to increase their supply while maintaining quality. I think the
Yeah.
fear for them has been, at first it was get as much supply as you can, get as much supply as you can, and that leads to no filters on who is listing. And so they've actually, removed underperforming listings that we already talked about. And they're putting stricter kind of norms in place for properties and standards for them to meet, or they are removed from the platform. So I think they're conscious of that. And I think that that is kind of their big bet is, okay, if every co-host can take on 5 more properties, it's not a huge amount of growth, but 5 times 20 is 100,000 properties that they're growing by that are going to be well run and up to their standards. That I think that's kind of their hope, is that that's going to really bring up the overall quality of properties, and also allow people who maybe were kind of scared to get in the game before, hand over their property to someone else that they know is going to do a good job, that's going to be more of a hyper local approach that we often talk about, which we know is the best performing
I'm getting the
of
t-shirts made. You just said it again. You just said hyperlocal.
hyper
I love it. We love hyperlocal. No, I agree with the vision for the co-host network. I think especially, there's lots of people in our industry who would be on that network,
Yep.
advertising their services and doing exactly that. And I think there is clearly a big focus here on quality, isn't there? Like, how do we level up? How do we make sure that people don't associate negative experiences with the brand? Yeah,
Mhm.
so I can see that. I can see I can see that for sure. I just I just wonder whether, with all of the technology that's out there now to manage one listing, whether
Yeah.
actually it becomes increasingly easy for people to be a one listing host, and whether it won't quite play out the way they think it will. I can see why they're going after it though. Really interesting. We're out of time. We're over time, in fact, because we've had so much cool stuff to talk about today. So I can't ask you extensively what you're up to, but tell me quickly what's going on this week.
Not a whole lot. Sticking to my routine, eating healthy. I've got my meal prep later tonight. I usually do that on Mondays for the week. So just boring, winter and boring, and staying in shape. What about you, Leo?
Boring about that, buddy. So we're getting married in 2 weeks. That's quite fun, isn't it? Getting married.
Leo, what the
I know,
hell?
right?
How did you not mention this before? You're moving and getting married in the same week?
I know. Well, I think, to be honest, we've kind of, in many ways, seen ourselves as been married for a while, considering we've got 3 kids together. Sometimes I actually even describe Jasmine as my wife. I don't know. I think we just kind of think she does the same thing because it's easier sometimes. So having a very small family wedding, and then we're gonna have a big party next year with dancing and all that fun stuff when baby number 2 is a bit older and Jasmine's a bit less attached to baby number 2, because obviously she can't party too hard at the moment. So yeah, we're doing a little family wedding in a couple of weeks. So we're on full prep mode for that, my friend.
That is amazing.
Fun, isn't
Congratulations,
it?
Leo.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yay.
All right, gang. Look, it was so nice to hang out with you all this morning. If you've enjoyed the episode, please hit like, share, subscribe on all the usual social places, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. All the best.
Want to stop juggling spreadsheets, calendars, and a dozen apps just to run your rentals? Logify makes it easy. It's an all-in-one toolkit for hosts. Build a direct booking website, automate guest messaging, and keep all your channels in sync. Running your rental business your way has never been simpler. And for Good Morning Hospitality listeners, you can get 20% off any yearly plan with code GMH20. Just check the link in the show notes to get started today.